The applause came from an empty theater. Bruce Lee stopped walking. He was backstage at the Los Angeles Music Center, looking for a quiet place to stretch before his evening appearance. He had not expected to hear anything, but the sound was unmistakable. Thunderous applause. The kind that only comes from thousands of people. Except the theater was supposed to be empty. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The opera performance was not until 8 o'clock. There should be no one here except technicians and perhaps a few musicians warming up. Bruce followed the sound. He pushed through a side door and found himself in the wings of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, the largest performance space in Los Angeles. 3,200 seats stretched before him, red velvet and gold trim, the crown jewel of West Coast performing arts. The seats were empty, but the applause continued. And then Bruce saw the source. On stage, alone under a single spotlight, stood a large man in casual clothes. He was facing the empty seats, his arms raised, receiving an ovation that did not exist. His eyes were closed. His face showed pure joy. He was living in a moment that had not yet happened. And from speakers positioned throughout the theater, a recording played. The sound of 3,200 people giving a standing ovation. The sound this man was practicing receiving. Bruce watched in fascination. The man lowered his arms. The recording stopped. He opened his eyes and saw Bruce standing in the wings. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the man smiled. "You caught me," he said. His voice was deep, resonant, clearly trained. "I practice receiving applause the way other singers practice scales." Bruce stepped onto the stage. "Why?" The man's smile deepened. "Because the applause is part of the performance. If you are not ready to receive it, you break the spell. The audience has given you something sacred. You must know how to accept it gracefully." He extended his hand. "I am Plácido Domingo." Bruce shook his hand. "Bruce Lee." Plácido's eyes widened with recognition. "The martial artist. The film star. I have seen your work. You move like music." Bruce smiled. "And you sing like movement." This is the story of an afternoon that neither man expected. Two artists from different worlds, meeting by accident in an empty theater. What they discovered in the next 3 hours would change how both of them understood their craft. Los Angeles Music Center. October 1972. Bruce Lee was in Los Angeles for a press event. A screening of Way of the Dragon followed by a reception. Standard promotional work that he neither loved nor hated. He had arrived early, as he always did. He liked to find spaces for training wherever he went. Empty hallways. Unused rooms. Any place where he could move without being watched. The music center had seemed perfect. Large, empty in the afternoon, filled with spaces that no one would think to check. He had not expected to meet the greatest tenor in the world. Plácido Domingo was 31 years old in 1972. Already famous. Already considered one of the finest opera singers of his generation. He would go on to become arguably the most celebrated tenor in history. But in October 1972, he was still rising. Still hungry. Still searching for the edges of his art. And he practiced receiving applause. Bruce was fascinated. "You record the applause yourself?" Plácido shook his head. "No. I have recordings from actual performances. Different audiences. Different acoustics. Different intensities. I practice with each one." He walked to a small tape machine at the edge of the stage. "This one is from La Scala in Milan. The most demanding audience in the world. When they approve, it sounds like this." He pressed play. The applause that filled the empty theater was different from the first recording. More refined. More measured. But also more meaningful. Plácido closed his eyes again. Received the phantom ovation with the same grace he had shown before. When it ended, he looked at Bruce. "And this one is from Mexico City. My home country. When they approve, it sounds like this." He played another recording. This applause was wild. Passionate. Uncontained. The sound of people who did not care about propriety, only about expressing their joy. Plácido received this ovation differently. Less formal. More emotional. Matching the energy of the audience that was not there. Bruce watched in silence. Processing. Finally, he spoke. "You are not just practicing receiving applause. You are practicing connection." Plácido pointed at Bruce. "Exactly. The applause is not about me. It is about the exchange. The audience gives energy. I receive it. Then I give it back in my next phrase, my next aria, my next performance." He sat down on the edge of the stage. Most singers think the applause is a reward. Something you earn. Something that belongs to you. He shook his head. But it is not a reward. It is a conversation. The audience is telling you what they felt. You must listen. You must respond. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Bruce sat down beside Plácido. For the next hour, they talked about performance, about connecting with audiences, about the strange alchemy that transforms technique into art. Plácido asked about martial arts films. When you fight on screen, who is your audience? The camera? The director? The people who will eventually watch? Bruce thought carefully before answering. All of them, and none of them. Explain. Bruce stood up, moved to the center of the stage. When I perform, I am not thinking about the audience. I am not thinking about the camera. I am not thinking about anything external. He assumed a fighting stance. I am thinking about the truth of the movement. Is this punch real? Would this kick actually work? Is my body expressing something genuine? He threw a combination. Fast, precise, even in demonstration, clearly powerful. If the movement is true, the audience feels it. If the movement is false, the audience knows. They may not understand why something feels wrong, but they feel it. He relaxed his stance. So I do not perform for the audience. I perform the truth, and the audience responds to truth. Plácido nodded slowly. It is the same with singing. I do not sing for the audience. I sing the truth of the music, the character, the emotion, and the audience responds to that truth. He stood up. But here's what I have learned that perhaps you have not. What? The audience is also part of the truth. Bruce tilted his head. What do you mean? Plácido walked to the edge of the stage, looked out at the empty seats. When I sing in Milan, the truth is different than when I sing in Mexico City. The audience changes the truth. Their expectations, their culture, their way of listening. He turned back to Bruce. A singer who ignores the audience is not performing truth. He is performing his idea of truth, which is a kind of lie. Bruce was quiet for a long moment. You are saying the audience is not just receiving. They are creating. Plácido smiled. Yes, every performance is a collaboration. The artist brings technique and intention. The audience brings attention and response. Together, they create something that neither could create alone. He pointed at Bruce. When you perform in Hong Kong, it is different than when you perform in America. Yes? Bruce nodded slowly. Yes. The audiences respond to different things. In Hong Kong, they see a Chinese hero. In America, they see something exotic. Does that change how you perform? Bruce considered. I have tried not to let it. I have tried to perform the same truth everywhere. Plácido shook his head. That is noble, but perhaps incomplete. He walked back to Bruce. The truth is not a single thing. It is a relationship. Your truth in Hong Kong includes the relationship with that audience. Your truth in America includes the relationship with that audience. He placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder. The greatest performers I have seen do not ignore the audience. They include the audience in their truth. They create something new with each performance. Something that has never existed before and will never exist again. Bruce absorbed this. Then he asked a question that surprised Plácido. Will you show me? Will you sing something now, for an empty theater, and show me how you would include an audience that is not there? Plácido laughed. You want me to sing for empty seats? I want to see how you create truth with nothing but your own intention. Plácido was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Very well, but I will not sing to empty seats. I will sing to you. You will be my audience. One person, and I will include you in my truth. He walked to center stage. This is an aria about love, about longing, about the pain of wanting something you cannot have. He took a breath, and then Plácido Domingo began to sing. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Bruce Lee had heard opera before. Recordings, film soundtracks, background music in restaurants. But he had never heard this. Plácido's voice filled the empty theater with a sound that seemed impossible. How could one human body produce something so large, so full, so alive? But more than the sound, it was the intention. Plácido was not singing to impress. He was not singing to demonstrate technique. He was singing to Bruce, to the one person in his audience. And somehow, that focus made the performance more powerful, not less. Bruce felt the music physically, in his chest, in his spine, in places he did not know could respond to sound. And he understood something he had never understood before. This was combat, not the movement, not the technique, but the energy, the intention. The way Plácido was reaching across the space between them and touching something inside Bruce that Bruce had not known was there. This was what Bruce tried to do with his martial arts. This was what film audiences felt when they watched him fight. Not the kicks, not the punches, but the energy that traveled through the screen and touched something inside them. Plácido was doing the same thing, with his voice instead of his body, with melody instead of movement. The principle was identical. When Plácido finished, the silence that followed was more profound than any applause. Bruce did not clap. He did not speak. He bowed, the formal bow of a martial artist, the bow that acknowledges a master. Plácido received the bow with grace. "You felt it," he said. "I felt everything," Bruce replied. Plácido walked toward him. "Now, show me what you do. Sing for me with your body." Bruce hesitated. "I do not have music." Plácido shrugged. "Neither do I. Not really. Music is just organized time. Movement is also organized time. Show me your organization." Bruce moved to center stage. For a moment, he stood still, finding his center, finding his breath. Then he began to move. Not fighting, not demonstrating techniques. Something else. He moved the way Plácido had sung, with intention, with emotion, with a story that his body was telling without words. It started slow. Tai Chi movements that flowed like water. Gentle, meditative. Then the tempo increased. Wing Chun techniques emerged. Faster, sharper. Then Jeet Kune Do. Explosive movements that seemed to come from nowhere. Kicks that defied gravity. Punches that cracked the air. And through it all, Bruce maintained what Plácido had demonstrated. Connection. He was not performing for an empty theater. He was performing for Plácido, for the one person in his audience. And that focus made everything more powerful. When Bruce finished, Plácido was silent. Then the opera singer began to applaud. Not the practiced reception of a phantom ovation. Real applause. Genuine response. "You understand," Plácido said. "You understand completely." Bruce was breathing hard. The performance had taken everything out of him. "I never thought of it that way before," he admitted. "I always focused on truth, on authenticity, on making the movement real." He looked at Plácido. "But I never thought about including the audience in that truth. I never understood that connection was part of authenticity." Plácido nodded. "The greatest artists throughout history have understood this. They do not perform at audiences. They perform with audiences. The performance is not complete until the audience receives it. And the audience is not passive. They are participants." He smiled. "You already do this instinctively. I saw it in your movement. But now you understand it consciously. And conscious understanding allows refinement." The two men talked for another hour. They discussed technique. How Plácido trained his voice. How Bruce trained his body. The similarities were remarkable. Both required daily practice. Both required attention to breath. Both required the submission of ego to craft. And both required vulnerability. "The hardest thing about singing," Plácido said, "is letting people see your emotion. You cannot hide behind technique. The voice reveals everything." Bruce nodded. "The hardest thing about martial arts on film is the same. You cannot hide behind choreography. The body reveals everything. If you are angry but pretending to be calm, the audience sees the anger." He paused. "I spent years learning to control that, to show only what I intended. But maybe I was wrong." Plácido raised an eyebrow. "Maybe the truth is not control. Maybe the truth is transparency. Let the audience see everything. Trust them to understand." Bruce considered this. "That is terrifying." Plácido laughed. "Yes, every night, every performance. Terrifying, but also liberating. When you stop controlling, you start connecting. And connection is where art lives." Before they parted, Plácido made a prediction. "You will become more famous than you can imagine," he told Bruce. "Your films will be seen by hundreds of millions of people. You will change what is possible in cinema." Bruce smiled modestly. Plácido continued. "But that is not why you will be remembered. You will be remembered because you connect. Because you include your audience in your truth. Because when people watch you, they do not just see movement. They feel it." He placed his hand on Bruce's shoulder. "That is rare. That is what makes an artist immortal. Not fame. Connection." Bruce thanked him. They exchanged contact information. They promised to meet again. But they never did. Bruce Lee died 9 months later, in July 1973. Plácido Domingo learned of his death while preparing for a performance in Vienna. He canceled the performance. He said he was too moved to sing. In an interview years later, Plácido spoke about that afternoon in the empty theater. "I have performed with the greatest musicians in history. I have sung in every opera house in the world. But that afternoon with Bruce Lee was one of the most profound artistic experiences of my life." He paused. Because I saw myself in him. I saw a man who understood that art is not about technique. It is about connection. It is about including your audience in your truth. He smiled sadly. When he died, I felt that I had lost a colleague. Someone who understood what I understood. Someone who was fighting the same battle on a different front. The recording of that afternoon does not exist. There were no cameras, no microphones, no witnesses except the two men and the empty theater. But both men carried what they learned. Plácido incorporated Bruce's perspective into his teaching. He told young singers to study martial artists, to understand that the body expresses truth just as the voice does. And Bruce incorporated Plácido's perspective into his final film. Enter the Dragon contains moments of stillness that Bruce had never included before. Moments where he receives the audience's attention before moving. Moments where he practices, without knowing it, the same skill Plácido had demonstrated. The skill of receiving. The skill of including. The skill of connection. October 1972. Los Angeles Music Center. An empty theater. Two artists who had never met. 3 hours that changed both of them. And a truth they discovered together. Art is not performance. Art is conversation. The audience is not watching. The audience is participating. And the applause, whether from 3,200 people or from one martial artist standing in the wings, is not a reward. It is a response. A continuation. A collaboration that never ends. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real-life themes.